Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now today we're going to tackle one of the classics of the Astra Militarum, the Savlar Chem Dogs. And these guys, if I'm remembering correctly, made their first appearance in the 4th edition Imperial Guard Codex, and they were troops sent to Armageddon. They were really good at fighting up close and in tunnels and such like that, so I figured what with Kill Team on the way, again, it would be worth looking at some of the other specialists of the Imperium who were really good at jobbing orcs. Now one thing you'll probably notice straight away is that this fella is not made exclusively from Citadel products. Both the legs and torso are from Anvil Industry. And the reason why I've chosen to use these is twofold. First of all, they're available in resin, and second, you can also pick them up as STLs if you have a 3D printer at home. Well, I have a 3D printer at home, and I thought it would be cool to do something, a little different. So this one's nice and simple. All of the paints will be listed in the description below, and I'm going to try something different today where I also show them on screen when they're mentioned. So if you do find that useful, let me know in the comments. I really appreciate it because it does take a little extra work. All the same, without any further mucking around, let's get started. Now the easiest way to get your hands on all of the parts you're going to need for this is to pick up the Brood Brothers box, which is a real mission to say. That is the one which is a box of Cadians with some Genestealer Cult heads included in there. Now there's nothing stopping you from just using this technique to paint those miniatures. They'll still look fine, but one thing you do want to do before you get to that is grab your knife and just shave the front of their heads flat. Just a little bit of work to file that smooth and they'll look more human, rather than having to worry about the fact that they've got weird Genestealer-y ridged heads. Now I've started with a primer spray of leather brown from Vallejo, but you could use Xandri dust, and to be quite honest with you, in the future that's probably what I would use. I've honestly just run out of it myself, so a warm mid-tone sort of beige or brown will be perfect for this. Now the first colour we're going to apply is Hobgrot Hide, which is one of the new base colours. It's a sickly sort of yellow colour, it's wonderful. A large base brush or anything of the sort, we're just going to go around all of the uniform. Now the leg wraps you can use for this colour as well. I am going to paint them Xandri dust in a couple of seconds, but however you do it, you'll probably find you do want to come back and give this a second coat. Now once that's dried, you're going to have this horrible puce yellow. It's wonderful. What I've got now is Tyrant Skull and one of my makeup brushes, because we want a nice soft bristled brush here. What I'll do is just quickly flick along the edge of my base here to get an idea, what am I going to leave behind? And then drag this across areas of detail. So you'll see it does need 2 or 3 passes over an area to really pick up that colour. But we get a nice, quick, soft-edged highlight to all of our clothing. So I'm going to go around now the whole miniature, and I'm going to make sure all of his uniform has a little bit of Tyrant Skull on it. Now remember, it's easier to sort of go back over the same place a few times and build up colour, rather than it is if you put too much on to begin with and you have to then try and fix it or start over. So too little is always going to be better than too much. So take your time and have a go with this. Now that's nice and quick and adds a bit of depth to the miniature. Now when we shade it later, that's going to tie all of that in together and we're not going to look quite so chalky. I've got here a little bit of Xandri dust and I'm going to paint in the leg wraps. There's nothing to say here, you couldn't leave these in the Hobgrot flesh, is it? I keep wanting to call it whatever, that yellow. But I think just a little bit of variation in color here is going to make these and the boots stand out a bit more. So one quick coat of this will do the job. Now while that's drying, we can move up the miniature and we're going to paint in his armor and his weapons. This is Stegodon Scale Green and it is a lovely shade of blue. So might look green to you, but that's blue to my eyes. You find this covers very well. In some areas you might need to come back and give it a second coat, but that is really up to you. But like I said, lovely shade of blue. We'll move on now to Rakarth Flesh, and this will cover very well over this. Funnily enough, we're going to paint in the skin. Don't worry too much when you get close to like eyes and similar, or gas masks, just go straight over those. Now, Rakarth flesh is a beautiful colour, and we have a very healthy boy in front of us. I'll move on now to Lead Belcher, and I'm going to paint in all of the metal details. And here you'll see why I've done the skin first, so I can be a little messy up around the gas mask here. And of course, any areas like chainsword, las gun, anything he's carrying. Now, with all of those little metal details applied, it's up to you whether you go the route that these buttons and what have you are silver too. I think I might touch those up in a couple of minutes. But for now, I'm going to show you why I've painted in the goggles in the same color as the skin. That's because Rakarth flesh is a great base coat for a nice bright red. And I've got here Wild Rider red. This is almost orange. And you can be pretty messy just chucking this into the goggles. Don't worry too much if it splashes over the sides, because we're going to tidy that up later. All we want is a nice bright color in there to start with. Now while that's drying, we'll use dryad bark to paint in the leather details. So boots, straps and equipment and what have you. And I do recommend switch on down to a smaller brush, and you can apply this to part of his face mask too. Now we're going to tidy up and fill in the gas mask itself. And for this, I've got Corvus Black. You can use a straight, like a Baden Black for this, for example, but a little bit lighter, like this doesn't dry quite pure black. And I think it looks really cool once it's shaded. So when you come near, like rather than trying to paint a straight line along the edge of the gas mask, tilt them back so that you can drag the edge of your brush very carefully around the edges there. And you'll find it much easier than trying to paint a straight line. Don't worry too much if there's a little bit of overspill towards the front of the rim, because when we shade that, that's pretty much going to disappear. And now at the opposite end of the spectrum, I've got Corax White, and I'm going to paint in the stripes on his sleeve. And it's also up to you whether you do the eagles on his equipment. You can do those silver, or you can do them in white, and I'm going to do them in white. Now at this point, any last minute cleanup is where you want to come to now. So if you've got any base colors that you need to tidy or little bits that you might have missed, just give them a quick squiz round and see whether or not you do need to touch any of those up. We'll move on now to shading them. And I've got my friend and yours, Agrex Earthshade. I've given this a really good shake. It is important that you shake the dickens out of these acrylic shades. And I'm going to use my medium shade brush. We're going to apply this all over the entire miniature. You'll see straight away what that's doing, which is wonderful. Talent in a pot, as they say. Now, anywhere that it is pooling too much as you apply it, while it's still wet, you can just shift it away with your brush and guide it to where you want it to go. So don't just splodge it all on and then leave it there to dry. You can be pretty fussy with your shades while they are still wet. So take your time. Go around the whole miniature, and I am going to then let this dry for about probably 40 minutes or so. Now with our shade dried, he's looking the business. And to be honest, you could just base him up and put him on the table like this. But why not go a little bit further? We'll do some highlights on him now, and I'm going to go back to Rakarth flesh just to brighten up his skin a little bit. Now from there you might choose to go a little higher with some pallid witch flesh or similar. I don't really see the need in it. It's up to you. Now I've got here some Sotek green, and this does look a lot more green than what we first put on. So you'll slightly change up the tone of the armor here. Using that same trick when it came to painting the glasses or the goggles, you can also do the same on the edges of his armor. Just tilt them up. And using the edge of your brush, you can get most of these areas without having to worry about using the very tip of the brush. Now, if you prefer a more blue finish, you might try Thunderhawk blue there instead. But again, that's up to you. I've got here some Gorthor brown, and we're going to go over some of the leather areas. You don't need to do very much of this. And same as with the blue stuff, if you do find you go over just a little too much, you can come back with your base color, and even though it's been shaded, you can just touch up with that base color, and you won't notice once it's on the table. Now with that finished, we'll pop on a little bit of Stormhost Silver to any silver areas that we want to highlight. You don't have to go this high up, but I think a really sharp silver edge does help with these things. So in particular up on the muzzle of his last pistol here, this is always a really good spot for this. And this little section on his back, also a good spot. From here you can either choose to be mild and leave it as it is, or be spicy and grab a little bit of white scar, and we are going to paint in just the edges of the white detail. Now you could here highlight the edges of his goggles, or even his boots, maybe the leg wraps, but it doesn't matter. Remember that you do want a fair few of these guys on the table, and that's looking pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is take him outside. I'm going to hit him with a matte varnish. Now for that I'm going to use Vallejo Spray Matte Varnish. I'm not going to use Munitorum Varnish because that's a slight satin finish, and I want this guy to be quite dull. Once that dries, I'm going to hit him with a base, and we'll see what he looks like once he's all finished. And there we have it, our Savlar Chem Dog is at last complete. And as you can see, this is really very simple to do. It's really just a matter of getting your hands on the parts, and whether you do choose to use the ordinary Cadian bodies, or step outside the box a little and look into some of the Anvil Industry add-on parts, I think you're in for a winner. This works really well and is super simple. So as always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of the patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, including my producers Alan Nuttall, Kyrie Crawford, Trainboy, Fred and Jimmy. Your support is invaluable. Any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comments box below. My Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So thank you very much for your time, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.